This topic, you will learn how to define payment entry parameters. Now, the payment entry types function allows you to define the characteristics of your payment entry screen, including which settings will appear in the payment entry window using this function. Now, when setting up your payment entry, you define the payment method, which could include check, cash, credit card, transfer, and so on, and if it's expense or revenue. Also, you define the data entry screen that includes fields to display and if those fields are mandatory entry. You also define the steps needed for posting, as in bank allocation, remittance, check printing, and so on. And finally, you determine when or if the payment information entered for this payment entry type are used to generate a payment export file. Now let's take a look at defining a payment entry parameter or payment entry screen. You decided that you needed to set up a payment entry type for manual checks for a new company, but the check has a custom format, so we need to create a custom manual check entry. To do this, we go to Setup, and then we go to the AP/AR accounting block, and then the payment entry types. As we open up the payment entry types, you can see all the different payment entry types that have been developed here. To create our brand new one, we click New, and then we enter a new unique code. Because it's going to be unique to a U.S. company, let's make it USA legislation. Now, as you can see, the description and the short description field are mandatory by the asterisk above the field, so let's go ahead and enter that information now. The group allows you to enter in the company. Because it's going to be specific to the company, let's go ahead and enter that information as well. Now, in the Generals tab, this is where you define the payment method, including whether it's bank or cash, and this is going to be bank, it's not cash management. You also set up the default payment attribute, which allows it to be a payment from the bank to the business partner. And you take the information from the sign, whether it's expense or revenue, from the sign field. So let's go ahead and select the attribute. Next, you select the payment method, which is used also for criteria when generation. On the next tab, the Entry tab, this is the data entry screen that you're setting up the fields that you're going to have and whether those fields are going to be manual entry or not. So we'll make sure that there's a bank field because the bank is going to be a default. It doesn't need to be mandatory. We might want to enter in information or description, so let's have a reference field as well, and maybe a header description field also. Additionally, we need to be able to enter the check number, and the check number should be mandatory, along with the bank amount, and that also should be mandatory. You can also set fixed columns on the line, and we'll set the default, which is 3 fixed columns on the line itself. You can enter these in batches by selecting batch entry, and extra fields here allow you if you don't have the necessary fields in the payment entry that you need. In addition, there's also fields here that are relative to Swiss banking system, the EZAG or the DTA. Our next step is the steps that are needed after entry to post. The steps we need are a couple of steps here. One is printing, and this is where you select your custom check. The next thing is bank posting. Now in the bank posting area, this is where you actually select automatic journals and what type of posting that you're going to have to generate or create the transaction into a financial transaction. So let's go ahead and the group entry. This is where we enter in the automatic journal. And selecting automatic journal allows the other fields, the payment grouping and the journal type, to default. Next, we create. Now creation takes a little bit of time because not only is it creating it, but it's also validating it and creating a screen for data entry. Now before going on to show you our new manual check payment entry screen, let's take a look at some of the other features that are available to you here. One, the Interbank Code It is a code used by all banks to indicate the bank operation type on the lines in the bank statements that are sent to their customers. There's also the invoice rate application. This checkbox, if the exchange rate applied between the open item currency for the closing of a business partner account will be the same as the rate on the invoice. Also, due date management. This box forces the group code to payment or due date according to the posting stages. You can also have cash payment. Now, this checkbox indicates that all payments made by this entry type are considered as cash payment. And of course, we actually mention and discuss the Swiss payment type that allows you to different types of payments for the Swiss system. This is for not only the Swiss bank files, also for importing, but also for the post-finance bank files, which are unique to Switzerland. Moving on to our Steps tab, other fields that are available here under the Processing section, this basically allows you to be able to take into account when doing automatic payment processing, where you actually do an automatic proposal. Also, bank allocation, allowing you to allocate the transactions to what bank or multiple different banks. You can also have deposits and remittance in that section as well. Also, this also is where you actually define and set up for electronic banking as well. The cash management posting is basically if you have a cash management system rather than the bank system. And of course, the printing section, you can have intermediate posting where you have transactions that are posted, say, prior to the bank posting section. And of course, you can have draft transfers as well. And finally, as we discussed earlier, the Treasury tab is set up if the payment information entered for the payment entry type is used to generate a payment export file. Now let's go take a look at our payment entry, where we go to AP/AR accounting to show you our payment entry screen for manual checks. And that's going to be in the payments block, and it's the payment receipt entry. And this is where we select our new custom payment entry. As you can see here, is for manual checks. So you can see the screen that we've used, including the payment number as generated after generating a payment, our site business partner. As mentioned earlier, we have a reference field, a description field. You can select the bank and also the business partner amount, the check number, as you can see, that is actually required, as we mentioned earlier, along with the data entry line and the fixed columns that we discussed earlier. And now it's ready for entry. Now you've learned how to define payment entry parameters and multiple types of payments, the different options, and also other features that are available to you.